I'm Bob Wilhelm, and I'm a storyteller. I'm also a teacher, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the masterclass that I began to teach many years ago, but which has evolved into the format that it is today. So let me tell you about what it is now, not what it was when it was first taught back in the late 1970s. It's for a small group of people who wish to explore their art as communicators, storytellers, creators of mythic worlds. And it's limited to 7 people. Now, the reason I chose 7 people is I find that about a week's work is really the maximum. Uh, if it's longer, it turns into an academic class. It doesn't hold the energy of being focused very intensely as an all day event um, or a partial all day event that is very intensive. So, over a course of 6 days with 7 people, everyone has a chance to tell, explore, work with 3 stories that they are concerned with now. Or it might be one story that can be explored in different parts. So, whether it's one story or 3 story, it's an intense period. It's a process in which you tell the story. And when the story is done, there's a little bit of quiet time, gather your thoughts, let the people who are listeners uh, also stay with the images. And then we begin to process the story. And I always process the story in this way rather than lecturing on the story or going into a critique of the performance of the story or the nature of the story. I ask people to go through a process where we always start with images. In other words, this is where the listener engages the story, it opens the door for the listener. And a successful story is one that has sufficient images to engage people in the audience. Not ideas, but images, pictures in the mind's eye. And of course, once that door is opened and people pass through it, a second door opens. It's like going deeper and deeper and deeper into a sanctuary, into a castle. Uh, it's in quest of the Holy Grail at the end of the process. And there are a number of antechambers that one has to go through in order to get where you're going. And not everyone will go all the way into the last place, the center of the story itself in the process, but most people will get through the first few steps. So the first step is images. The second step is emotions. What are the feelings that these images generate? And these first 2 steps, of course, are what is the center of a artistic process, a dramatic process that Aristotle identifies as catharsis. This is what children are happy with a story. It's rich in imagery and they have strong feelings about it. And they don't care about interpreting the story or applying the story. That's an adult process. So we always go through these first 2 steps with any story. And then depending on the time that we have and the nature of the story, I, I might take us through a few other doors to go deeper into the story. But it's not essential. And the third door that opens is the door that opens into interpretation, meanings of the story. And there's always more than one meaning to a story. So here we look at what's the story about in terms of the teller, the listener, the culture we live in, issues that are sociological, psychological, political, religious. I mean, we all have our own reactions to what the story is about. And then the next step after that is a very powerful one, and that's do we recognize ourselves in the story? How do we apply the story to our own lives? This is a moment of transformation, actually. It's a time when all of a sudden, maybe after you've heard a story many times, you say, oh my goodness, that's me in the story. This is about me. I've done this many times in my life. I've told stories on stage professionally in concerts for many, many, many times, extending over a period of years. And then one day, as I'm telling the story in this setting, I suddenly realize, oh my goodness, this is why I'm telling the story. This is really why I am telling the story. And of course, then you have to continue with your performance and you work out the process yourself as you think about what that revelation is about. Now, an important part of this whole process is that there are listeners. It's absolutely essential there are listeners. And there are two kinds of listeners in the master class. One are the other tellers. So if you are telling three stories, you're not only telling three stories, you're listening to your own story, first of all, but you're listening to the stories of the other six tellers. So that's 18 more stories that you're listening to. So it's an incredible immersion into the world of stories. Very different stories, told in very different manners, but we have stepped across a threshold and we have gone into the realm of stories. And this stimulates a lot in our own storytelling and in our own evaluation of what we need to do as tellers. So this is an important process. There's also a larger audience. People come with friends, they come with spouses. There are people who aren't storytellers but who are story listeners who want to listen to an intense week of stories and think about what storytelling is about. Maybe they're counselors, maybe they're writers, maybe they're friends. It doesn't make any difference. But there's another set of people who also contribute, and it's very important to know how your stories are working with an audience. And it's good to be an unfamiliar audience. I mean, it's really pretty easy to tell a story effectively for an audience that is unified around a core set of beliefs or principles or identity or whatever that is. But a really good story needs to reach everybody. It's not a story that is limited to only a specific audience. That's the power in stories. That it has the potential, the actual potential, to cut across all the boundaries, social boundaries, intellectual boundaries, value boundaries, and touch people in different ways. So there's another process that goes on in the master class. And the master class means that as you go through the story, for example, the first step, going through the images, a number of people will share their images, and that will trigger other people to share more images. And what we're really doing is we're kind of having a retelling of the story and the reaction of the listeners. They're taking us back into the story, so we're hearing the story a second time. And a third time when we go into the realm of feelings. Now people are talking about how the story affected them. And we're reviewing the whole narration. True, we're choosing moments in it, moments that touched us, but it's also an occasion to go more deeply into the story. So rather than stepping back and analyzing the story, taking it apart piece by piece, in the process of reacting to the story, we are also learning the story more deeply, discovering the wealth that's present in the story, and that's very enriching. When we come to the end of the process, and this fits in an hour, so a person tells a story, maybe at that moment when they finish telling the story, they'll say, well, I don't want any commentary, or I told the story and that's fine. And you get up from the chair, the storyteller's chair, and that's fine. But very rarely does that happen. Most people want to hear commentary. And they begin, after they tell the story, taking a little bit of silence, and then I will generally ask, well, how did that go for you? And it gives the teller an opportunity to kind of do a quick evaluation of the story, their own feelings about how well it went or how maybe it didn't go well. But it's good to get that out. We don't stay with that. We don't dwell on that. We just want to hear what the teller has to say, and then we go into the images. Now, the whole process of this has evolved so that we generally meet for about 4 hours a day. It's generally in the afternoon. And so we have about an hour for each person, a little tiny break in between, and we repeat it Monday all the way through Saturday. So we go through 21 stories. And the process is always the same. At the end of the story, I may take the story as an example for some reflection on some teachings on storytelling. That particular story may have revealed to us a pattern in storytelling that's very important for us to know as storytellers. And it's also a time to give, and I don't like the word feedback, it's also the word affirmation. It's also a time to suggest to the teller how they might go with that story. They're already good tellers, that's why they're here. They don't have to be affirmed. You get affirmed in an audience when you're doing a concert or whatever, and people applaud and tell you you're a great teller. But here we're just acting as peers, and I'm just the facilitator. So the question is not, wow, you did a great job, et cetera, et cetera. The question is, well, that was, a fascinating story. What are you going to do with it now? Where are you going to go? What's the cutting edge of the story? What can be done? If there's a problem in the story, what about dealing with it in this way rather than that way? What about turning things around in the way that you tell this part of the story? So there are a lot of possibilities, and that's kind of where we come towards the end of a session. Mornings are free, evenings are free. We always have the option of joining with one another at the end of the afternoon session, going out for dinner at some local place. We choose a different place every night so we get some variety in the food. There are places that are good, they're not expensive, they're good. They're good places to sit and talk, to continue the conversation in the setting of an evening meal. And when mornings, of course, are free, so you have a time, if you wish, to work on your stories. Some people will do that, or if you wish to take it as free time, as recreation time, and do whatever you need to do from sunrise until we gather at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then you're with us for 4 hours. Maybe you'll join us for dinner. I hope you do. And then you're free in the evening as well. So that's the way that the story masterclass works. I really encourage people to come back again for a second week. It can be soon, it can be later, and it's a way of monitoring your own changes and advancements in the art. And of course, there's always the possibility of online tutoring or other ways of supplementing work beyond the session. But those are other issues. I'm really talking about the 6 days, the master class, and what it's about. So, to close, the master class is a supportive setting for storytellers with various levels of experience, beginning storytellers, very skilled professional storytellers who come from many different settings. Some of them may be actors, some of them may be writers, some of them may be counselors, some of them may be teachers, preachers, grandparents, all different ways that you practice your art in the various settings. And we come together, we form a community. It's really quite a lovely community because we're sharing things that are important to us. And I find that people keep in contact with each other long, long after these seminars. And we explore things that are important to us. We listen to stories that are important to other people. And we integrate all of this into our own sense of who it is that we are when we tell and when we listen. Telling and listening, the two crucial parts of storytelling. It's not just the telling, It's the listening part that is so important as well, and that's part of it. So I'm going to stop. This is a kind of a survey of what the masterclass is about. I hope you decide to come when you're free and share stories with us and enrich yourself with the stories that other people bring as well. I'm Bob Wilhelm. I'm a teacher and I'm a storyteller.